he teaches distracted driving and youthful offender and all that stuff. So it's actually, he'll do a much better job, and you don't have to listen to me speak. I know you guys get tired of it. So with that, I introduce Dallas Root.
So my name is Dallas Root. I'm a sergeant at the Dayton Highway Patrol Post. Some of the things that we do is education. A lot of people know the Highway Patrol as an enforcement agency, traffic stops, citations, arresting people off the roadways. That is one faction of how we can curb these kind of issues, but it's not the end-all be-all. And I found that you can't arrest or enforce your way out of problems. Education is the most positive impact that you can have to reach the most people through that ripple effect. So, distracted driving. It's become a very hot topic amongst the nation, the state, local communities, right? So, what is, in your mind, distracted driving?
You're doing something else rather than focusing when you're driving.
So, a lot of people will, some people realize that it's more than just talking on the phone, right? We have a lot of distractions in our lives. Unfortunately, it could be a conversation, things in your mind, stress, food, multitasking. You just keep adding to the table. But when I think about distracted driving, I also think about addiction. Being distracted has become a part of our culture. It's become an addiction that we've all become accustomed to. These things are an addictive nature. And I've played I've played it with a lot of the kids that I've taught during some of our distracted driving courses and our young youth educational things that we do. It's funny because you'll watch them, you'll tell them they have to put their cell phone away. And a lot of them will grumble because before it ever starts, they're all sitting here and they're doing this and they're communicating with people. And they'll be respectful and they'll turn it off or they'll put it away. But a lot of times they don't turn it off. And it's buzzing and it's going off and they know it. And they can feel it in their blood that that thing's going off and I have to check it. And it's funny because I'll always give them a break. And during that break, you'll see the first thing that they'll do is they pull that thing out and they are on it. And they're going to the bathroom and they're still on their phone, they're coming back down and they're in, I'm sitting down and I'm like, all right, turn your phones off. And I'll ask them, how many of you, why I was talking in the first portion of our section of the education portion, how many of you had that weird desire that you had to check your phone? How many of you felt just that internal burn in your belly like, I have to know that piece of information? And a lot of them will raise their hands, some of them will be very reluctant about it, but that is their first real taste of what it's like to be addicted, to understand what addiction is about. It's your body producing those endorphins to feel like you are connected and to give you that satisfied feeling. And I think a lot of times that's why we have so many issues with distracted driving, because we as a culture has created our children to become, as adults, in an environment where we have a lot of stimulus. We have a lot of information that's readily available to us at an instant. And they need that. They need that to feel whole, to feel like a human being, to feel like that they're connected, that they have a purpose, right? So I think that's one of our driving factors that are leading into our distracted driving issues, is it starts with the addiction. I think we know why it's important, because it causes death. It causes injuries on our roadways. It distracts you from what you are meant to do behind the wheel. If you go to some other European countries, a lot of times they don't even have cup holders in the vehicles. Why? Because driving is an experience. It's not just a way to get from point A to point B, but it's an experience that you get to have as a developed society. So when you are on the radio or you are drinking that Coke or whatever you get from the fast food and they don't have those cup holders, because that's not what a car is meant for. But we as a society use them as multitasking. We use it to make money. And then we get from point A to point B. And now it's just become second nature. And in that midst of driving and being distracted and have those multitasks that we have going on, you forget about what the purpose of driving is. And a lot of times you don't see the ripple effect of what comes from the dangers when it goes wrong. And one thing that I always do for the young kids, I will play some videos. And there's a lot of commercial-based videos that are out there put out by some of the insurance companies, where they'll show the child driving the vehicle, and then they're distracted. Or maybe they're speeding and they're not paying attention, and they run a stop sign, and then they get hit by a Mack truck, and the car starts flipping. And you see the kids inside that car. They see that, right? Because we have very violent video games. We have a society where you can see that sort of stuff on television and YouTube, but it doesn't really affect them because they don't know how to really buy into it. So what I do is I pick out a mother, or I pick out a father that shows up to these training events with their child, and I always ask them, that was your child that was just killed behind that wheel. How do you feel? And sometimes I'll have the parents start crying because they internalize it. And then you watch that child right next to them see how they get the reaction from their parents, and then they internalize it. Then sometimes what I'll do is I'll turn it around. I have another video where I'll show a girl that's in an absolute hurry to get out of school. She's trying to get to her job, right? Because now we're putting even more responsibilities on our young people to have adult-based responsibilities. So they feel that pressure, that same pressure that we have as adults. So the child's in a big hurry. She takes off in the car. She's running late to work. She's just leaving school. And it shows a father sitting out in front of the school waiting for his young daughter to come out of the school, cross the street in a school zone, and get into his vehicle. So in the midst of this young child crossing the road, the girl that is in a hurry, not paying attention, enters the school zone. She's distracted, and she hits this young child and kills it. And it's interesting to see when you have a father in there, and I'm like, tell me what you thought when you saw that video. Obviously, he's going to see it from the perspective of the father waiting for his young child to come out, just watching the child get killed in front of him. But it's even more interesting when I pick out a child in the crowd and I tell them, you are that person driving. I want you to look at that dad, and I want you to tell him you're sorry. They can't do it because now they understand the gravity of the decisions that they make when they're behind the wheel. It's unfortunate because we do put them behind the wheel with a lot of stimulus, with a lot of, or should I say, a lack of experienced driving. But we put a lot of emphasis on making sure that they're more responsible as us as adults, but do we properly prepare them for the responsibilities that they have to take on while they're driving? So, a lot of times we think about being on the phone while we're driving, right? Texting, talking on the phone. You got a young lady putting on makeup. I see people reading books, and now I think they're getting away from actually reading books and magazines and newspaper articles and looking at their calendar as much as now it's on your phone or your tablet. We talked about the food. I know Lieutenant Gebhardt has a great illustration where he was behind a semi driving down 75, and this semi was all over the road. When he gets up there and he talks to the driver, he realizes the driver had a big bundle or a bucket of sunflower seeds on the passenger side, and he's over there reaching, grabbing food out of a container while he's operating a semi that's over 80,000 pounds all over the roadway. And a lot of times people don't associate that those minor little things that we do behind the wheel that takes you away from the main focus of driving is a distraction. A lot of times it can be as simple as a conversation. That's why if you look at our laws when kids are 16 years old, they are not allowed to have too many passengers in the vehicle that are not family related, right? So when a young child gets behind the wheel because of the lack of experience, I think the rough estimate is around 40 to 50% chance that they're going to be involved in an accident just because of their lack of experience. When you add in another passenger in the vehicle, that increases their odds of being involved in a crash by 10% for each person in the vehicle. So you can imagine if you have a young teen, 16, 17 years old, and they have 4 other occupants in the vehicle, a lot of them are probably going to be peers or friends. They're all going to be distracted on the phones. They're all going to be distracted in conversations. which is going to lead to more distraction for the driver. Maybe that driver even takes even more risk because now they're trying to show off to their peers. So I know there's a lot of words on here. A lot of it we've already talked about. It could be reaching items, pets in the vehicle. I've seen people driving with their animal and cause a crash because the animal jumps over on their lap and it causes them to lose control of the vehicle. Those are some things that you also have to take into account as even a young mother that's single and they've got that young baby in the back. I've had some people I pulled up, what's going on? Well, the baby just lost the bottle. And, you know, and the baby loses the bottle, the baby's going to get upset, it's going to cause a distraction, right? Because your main focus as that child's crying is in the back seat. You can't really see them. Are they going to take the time to pull over and properly address the concern? Or are they going to try to do it because they're in a hurry and reach back and grab stuff? I think back, I have 2 kids, one's 12 and one's 17. I can tell you wholeheartedly I've done that. Where I didn't take the time to pull over and I've retched in the back seat, I'm trying to grab something, and next thing you know, I'm in the wrong lane. We are all responsible, and we have all done the same thing. So, you can see here, this is what our interstates look like. There's a lot of vehicles on the roadway. I remember there was one study that I looked at that was back from 2015. I think it was, I think the numbers was really low, because it said at any given time there was like 481,000 people on their electronic devices at any given time. That's 2015. I guarantee that's underrepresented of what's really truly going on out there, because you cannot drive down the road without seeing multiple people on these things. And now, if you look at technology, I looked the other day for a new radio for my son's pickup truck. Every single radio you want to buy aftermarket and put in a vehicle, every vehicle you get off the lot connects to your smartphone. Now, why that is a great concept to have, because now you can do hands-free calling. But guess what? Now we're just really adding into, or even more need, to have these things connected in our lives, even while we're driving. This has become the primary option that people look for. Does it connect to my smartphone? That is a primary option that people are looking for in a vehicle. Before they look to see, what's the gas mileage? What are the safety ratings for this vehicle? Does it connect to my smartphone? So we've seen since 2013 that we have had a rise in traffic accidents. Is it attributed to distracted driving? I would say yes. Unfortunately, what we run into, especially as an organization that likes to keep stats and statistics, we don't really keep stats and statistics in such a way until we have a mechanism in place. Now when we handle crash reports, or if we issue a citation, we are now in the business of trying to capture whether we think that person was distracted at the time or not. But we didn't have that 5-10 years ago. So the numbers were going to be really low. And then you're going to see a huge increase because now we are finally in a position where we can document those. If you go to the Ohio State Patrol's website, we now have a forward-facing mapping system that you can pull up every vehicle crash from anywhere in the state that any agency has handled, and you can actually pick out and see where some of the #1 offender areas are for distracted driving crashes. You can narrow it down to the month or the day, or even the time that you need to be cautious about being on the roadway because there are issues with OVIs or seatbelts or people being distracted. Those are our 3 main priorities as a law enforcement agency for highway patrol. So, what's distracted driving cost us? It cost us lives. I know in 2017 we had, usually we average about 1,000 fatals a year, and 58 of them were attributed to distracted driving. However, that's a skewed number because those are the only ones that we can prove that were related to distracted driving. There are many times we handle a crash or we handle a fatal crash and we may never know. We can assume, but we may never fully know whether that person's distracted. You have a 1 car into the back of a semi and the driver is killed on impact. We may never know if that person was distracted. We can assess or assume, but we may not be able to represent that number. So I guarantee the numbers, 58, I think that's very low. I think it's substantially higher. So in a research center, 95% of all Americans that own mobile phones of some kind, and 77% of Americans own smartphones. There's some person out there that isn't connected to the world. AT&T did a study that said 81% of people said that they text while driving, while 60% said they email and 50% access their social media. Those numbers are skyrocketing. And if you look at our young people today, they need social media, they need to be connected, and that's the only way they can contact and communicate with people, even within their own family. You can't go to a restaurant and look around and see the kids and the parents all on their mobile phones because they don't know what to do with their free time. They don't know how to use this and talk, but they know how to use this and talk, especially when their loved one's right across the table from them. So I will tell you, let's talk about drunk driving and their similarities to distracted driving. So when somebody's driving intoxicated, it's because they have an inability to separate multitasks, or they can't use their divided attention skills. Distracted driving is the exact same thing. I can tell you today, when I follow somebody, whether daytime or nighttime, I cannot tell you based on their driving on whether they're drunk or distracted, because they do the exact same thing. When somebody is impaired, they can only focus on one task at a time. That's why when we take them through the walk and turn and one leg stand and some of those tests that you see on TV, those are called divided attention skills. We are providing an instruction. They have to listen to the instruction. They have to formulate that they understand those instructions and then be able to accomplish that task. But at the same time, they're also trying to focus on their balance. They're trying to focus on some external things that if you're not impaired, you don't have to think about. I don't have to think about maintaining my balance while I sit here and have a conversation with you. But an impaired driver will have to think, either I'm listening to him or I'm focusing on keeping my feet heel to toe and staying on this line. Either I'm focusing on him or this. I can't do both. If I was in a phone conversation and doing the same thing, I guarantee you I'd have the same problem. How many times have you been driving somewhere and you get a phone call and you're on that phone call, or you're having an internal debate in your mind and you're so focused on what's going on rather than driving that you've passed this turn where you're supposed to go? Or you've driven a long distance and by the time you got there, you don't even remember, I don't remember driving here. It's those divided attention skills. So anymore, I cannot tell you when I'm behind somebody, and me and my wife had the same debate when I'm in a personal car and we see people all over the roadway. All right, she's like, they must be drunk. And you pull up next to them like, nope, they're on their phone. So the state of Ohio tried to come up with a way to curb some of these numbers. The legislators tried to work on it that if you were on your phone and you were texting, that we could stop you based on a secondary offense, which is like your seatbelt. I have to have you commit a traffic violation before I can stop you and talk to you because you're texting on your phone. The bad thing is within that law, I had to prove that you weren't in the process of making a phone call or receiving. You weren't calling an emergency number. You had all these criteria that you had to meet that was very difficult for a law enforcement officer to obtain without me finding a reason to stop you, and then I'd have to seize your phone, and technically I'd have to get a warrant to see what you were actually doing to prove what you were doing on your phone was actually causing the distraction. So there were some limitations to it. Now our children now, when they're driving under the age of 17, now if this is a primary offense. However, the problem we run into is, can you tell a 17-year-old from an 18-year-old on the roadway? So I can't just necessarily stop because now I'm discriminating based on age. And what happens if I stop that person and they're 22 years old and I stopped them because they were on their phone? But really, I thought they were 17. Now I've just violated their civil rights. So good intentions, but not a lot of follow-throughs that we could actually enforce it. So now the legislators have gotten a little bit better and they've given us a little bit more tools in our bag. Now we have this new law for distracted driving. And what it is an enhancement that we add on to the traffic stop. So primary thing that I'll run into as an example, I was following a young man in a Jeep. It's late at night, he's on the phone, I can see the phone shining because he's texting. He's driving down the middle of a 2-lane highway, straddling both lanes. Doesn't even know that I'm behind him. So now I already know that he's distracted on his electronic device, right? I've already got a primary traffic violation because now he's committing marked lanes. I light him up. He doesn't even see my overhead blue lights flashing because he's so in tune on the text message that he's doing. So I hit my siren. then all of a sudden you see him drop the phone. So I've already been able to establish that I can say definitively that that traffic violation was caused because of his distraction. So now when I go up and I have contact with him and I issue him that citation for the marked lanes, now I can cite him based on the distraction too, which is a kicker. It's an extra $100 fine that we add on to your already expensive traffic citation. Then, if it's your first time offense, if you want to get that $100 waived, you can actually take an online course. You can get a certificate that talks about the dangers of distracted driving, and they can get that $100 fine waived off their citation, which further adds on to, like I said, we can't enforce our way out of it, but it forces that education piece for the people that don't necessarily want to be educated. So does anybody have any questions about distracted driving? Yes, sir.
Do the driver ed classes, are they still prevalent in high schools around where they have driver's ed? Now, I know when I was in school many years ago, we had driver's ed, and now we see these private driving schools show up pretty regularly. Do they, and if they do not, what can be done to have what you're telling us here integrated into some of their driving school curriculum?
Right. I hear you. I don't know the exact answer for that because every school district's different. I know when I went through high school, they offered driver's ed through high school, or you can take it through a private course. I ended up taking a private course because my parents felt at the time that I would have gotten more interaction and more driving education from the private course because it was longer. Today, I know I put my 17-year-old kid through a private course because the high school never offered anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is going to be based off of funding availability for teachers, and do they have that buried into their curriculum. I think that becomes more of a school decision to make rather than the law enforcement. I don't know of any specific legislation that forces the schools to teach driver education.
The AAA, I know locally, the AAA has a driver training, a driving school. Would AAA fall technically and strictly within the same category as driving school as Smith Driving School that out here someplace in the boondocks? Would the AAA facilities around the state, would they have, or would they be susceptible, or would they, could anything be enforced or imposed on them that you couldn't on, say, Jones Driving School?
Now, the actual driving schools, the private ones, they do have to abide by certain criteria at a minimum level by state law. So when you read through the state law, there are requirements they have to meet. Because I remember signing a bunch of paperwork for my 17-year-old son when he went through. They had to have so many hours of pre-driving before they were even allowed to go to school. So they get that 15.5 gap where they get the permit. They had to document, and I had to do it with my son, ride time with him as that pre-education before he goes to the driving course. One thing I think that does is it forces the parents to get involved. Because I think we as a society has made it very easy to just say, you go deal with it, I don't have time. That's what we've turned into. But I like that because it forces it back in the parents' lap a little bit to understand what their son or daughter is capable or is not capable of doing, and try to teach them before they get there. Then they have those certain hours that they have to meet. My son did it online, the educational course, but then he's got all these parameters he has to pass on the actual driving practicals. I know that hasn't changed even when I went through. I went through the butt in the seat course, and we had to be there so many hours, and they had to cover all these different topics because they're required by law. Now, I don't know about AAA because I think that's an agency that provides a service to people, but I think that a lot of times that comes down to funding and what their capabilities or path is.
Well, one of the things that you're talking about, first of all, we have troopers that go in and talk. They schedule troopers to come in and talk at all those schools, talk about similar topics. But recently, the Department of Public Safety just took driving schools under their umbrella. And that's one of our goals for next year, is to shore up and try to improve the different criteria for driving schools. So that's falling under DPS right now.
The last I knew, there was a retired Miami County Sheriff's Deputy, Ron Ventura, who was a driving instructor at the AAA.
Yeah,
Here.
he still is.
I don't know whether he still is.
Yes,
Much
he
to
is.
his wife's chagrin,
Well,
he
that's-
still is.
that's-
He is, and Pat Brown retired from Troy. He's there too.
So
We inspect other cars.
I just, I'm just curious if any of this information could be integrated into what they
Well,
do.
AAA right now, they are at Piqua High School because they don't have an office in Piqua anymore. So they go to the high school to teach their classes
But the
now.
kids don't get any credit for the course.
No, it's all, you sign up for it.
Now, I can tell you probably here in Miami County, based on the AAA, it sounds like it's very indoctrinated within your guys' community. That may not be as easily manipulated in maybe a bigger city like Columbus or Cincinnati or even in the city of Dayton. They would be completely overmatched by the number of schools and kids that they would have to try to outreach to. Yes, sir.
I'm saying in Germany, it takes forever to get your license and it's very expensive. And they don't use the cell phones. Kids don't go around over there because the cell phones are very expensive. Like it costs us $25 for about 15 minutes. You buy the time.
Well, and the networks over there are not as vast as they
That's
are
right.
here in America. Because I know that they have to pay, like you're saying, those higher rates because they have to use satellite companies and other mediums to get you connected. Unlike here, where there's a cell phone tower probably every 5 miles.
That's right. Right.
Yes, sir.
When are they finally gonna just make cell phone use a primary offense and get it done with? That'd be a good tool for you out in California. You can't talk on those things and drive.
Yeah, well, and then some local ordinances you can take in effect within the city. So like the state law has got its restrictions, but then a city ordinance can be passed and it can be even more restrictive than state law. It can't be less restrictive, but they can be more restrictive. And I believe there are some communities within Ohio that their city ordinance would say no cell phone use at all, or it's a primary violation within that city limits. That PD has the opportunity to sanction, but we wouldn't as a state agency.
Is the state moving towards that at some point? Or-
It is a passion of Governor DeWine's, I do know that, but with everything, it takes time to work through the process and go through our legislators for them to enact those laws, because then they have to test what are the positive and negatives that come from the decision. Like I said, there was some great intentions with the original texting laws that they started, but there were some legality issues that they ran into that made it very ineffective for us to enforce. But now with the new distracted driving law, it's kind of taken that out of consideration, and it's given us a little bit more power, a little bit more bite that we can actually use. So like I said, it also forces that educational piece. And then it's not, I think a lot of people, like I said, have gotten accustomed to the cell phones being the main contributor to distracted driving. But you can think back before cell phones, there's still a lot of other factors that contribute to distracted driving, whether it's conversations in the vehicle, eating in the vehicle, doing makeup, other things that are other than driving.
Thank you, Dallas. Very good, thank you.